Katzen TV.
Hey everybody, it's your guest reviewer JB here for Katzen TV. Today we're going to be taking a look at Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Whisky a Go-Go 1968. Oh my goodness. But before we get started on that, I want to ask you to please subscribe to this channel for more cultural content coming out regularly. Please consider underwriting the efforts. There are links to Patreon, Ko-Fi, merch, etc. below right there. And if you like what you see here, please do share this video out. Give it a thumbs up. Helps the algorithm, helps us continue bringing you this wonderful content. Let's dive right into this thing. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Whisky a Go-Go 1968. Another amazing collection of music coming out from the Zappa Family Trust. This is another project which was spearheaded by the one and the only Joe Travers, the vaultmeister, the man who's bringing you all of these riches. Thank you once again, Joe. Let me just say, 1968 Mothers of Invention, one of my favorite eras of Frank Zappa's music. Again, Frank's music from the mid-60s up until his death in the early 90s went through a lot of different phases. You could kind of roughly break them down by the bands, the ensembles he was using at the time. There's not always a clear division between that, but the late 1960s Mothers of Invention was a really incredible thing. It was kind of developed out of a bar band. It really has that tough R&B sound, but it kind of blossomed into something really unique and wonderful once Zappa started bringing some of his more amazing kind of quote-unquote classical influenced compositions into the band. And there was a really interesting combination of what the rhythm section was doing and what the melodies were doing over the top. This is really a amazing live album, a multi-track live recording from the late 1960s, recorded at the Whisky and a Go-Go on the Sunset Strip right down there. Just one of these things. Let me just say, I'm one of those Zappa obsessives. You'll remember there was that DVD of the Overnight Sensation DVD kind of making, and there was the bonus video at the end where Joe was kind of going through the vault, and I'm one of these people that's pausing the things, and there was like up on one of the shelves there was this thing, Whisky a Go-Go 1968 masters, the original 1-inch master tapes, and it's just like I gotta hear that, and it took a number of years for this thing to come out, but here it is. Yeah, little bits and pieces of this performance have been kind of dribbled out over the years, and we'll go into a little bit of that later, but finally here we have 3 CDs, 3 hours worth of incredible music just to dig into. Let's go a little bit, give it a little bit of context. Let's look at the band as it was at that time, 1968. Okay, so this is about the time that they were recording Uncle Meat, Cruising with Reuben and the Jets, etc., etc. We got Ray Collins on vocals, the velvety toned, Ray Collins, one of those incredible singers that really made a mark on those early Frank Zappa Mothers of Invention albums. This is actually one of his final kind of official performances with the band. He would come back, time to time. He made a little appearance on Apostrophe later on some backing vocals, etc. But this is kind of towards the end of his, official tenure with the band. Okay, we got Frank on guitar and vocals. Frank, the only guitar player on this gig. Later on, Frank would use a lot of rhythm guitar players. Sometimes he would have 2, sometimes even 3 other guitar players in the band. But what I really love about this is Frank is the only guitar player on this gig, and you really, really get to hear a lot of Frank's comping. One of the things that I missed from the mid-70s on was Frank didn't do a lot of those rhythm guitar parts, and he was just a fantastic accompanist. You hear him a lot kind of comping behind the saxophone solos and so forth going on this. Just wow, great stuff. We got a horn section here. We got the one and only Ian Underwood, primarily on alto saxophone and other instruments as well, clarinet, flute, etc. Bunk Gardner on tenor saxophone, and the one and only Motorhead Sherwood on baritone saxophone. 3-man horn section right there. One of the things that I really like about this edition of the Mothers is they were using, pickups. They were using, electronic mics kind of welded into the mouthpiece and so forth, and running the horns through guitar amps is what it sounds like, not necessarily through a PA. So the horns always have that very interesting sound. There's this interesting timbre going from the horns at this period that really gives this edition of the Mothers a distinctive sound. Then going further down for the rhythm section, we got Don Preston on keyboards and oscillators and kind of electronics, kind of pre-synthesizer stuff, doing a lot of really bizarre stuff just with this kind of, I don't want to say homemade, but kind of this improvised electronic rig that he had at the time. Fantastic stuff. Roy Estrada on bass. Ooh, I won't go into the particulars of Roy Estrada. You can look that up, whatever, but fantastic bass player. I'll put it that much. Fantastic bass player, at least at this period, had that real R&B groove, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Jimmy Carl Black and Arthur Dyer Tripp on drums and percussion. Wow. Like I said, one of the things that I really love about those late 60s, early 70s Zappa and Mother recordings is there's a lot of that kind of rhythm and blues feel to the rhythm section. You remember we talked a while back about Funky Nothingness, that other box set that came out a while back, and how we really dig into that R&B bag on that. We still got that, this is a little bit earlier from that, but we got that kind of low down kind of groove, that rhythm and blues kind of bar band groove. Fantastic stuff. And one of the things about, again, this edition of the Mothers is they could play that stuff so convincingly because, of course, that's what they came up from. If we look at it this way, each edition of Zappa's bands had kind of their specialty and they could do things. Let's talk about like a composition, a much later composition, Alien Orifice, right? I mean, that is something that only one of those 80s bands could play, right? Because of the precision and everything that needs to be done there, and that kind of groove. And Chad Wackerman on drums and so forth, Steve Vai, playing the impossible guitar parts. And yeah, the 1968 Mothers could not play that tune. It would not sound good. It wouldn't be appropriate to them. But at the same time, something like Valerie or In the Sky, two of the tunes that we have on this box set, those 80s bands, to me, they couldn't do that stuff convincingly. As wonderful, as incredible musicians as they are, there's something about the kind of stumbling, bumbling R&B kind of bar band groove going on with this edition of the Mothers that just like, bam, that's it. Solid stuff right there. All right, so let's take a look at the box set itself. It's not really a box set. It's not in a box as such, so I apologize for the bit of a misnomering it. It is a 3 CD set. We got this kind of big gatefold. Let's take a look at this right here. Let's look at it one disc at a time. Disc 1 by 1. Taking a look at disc 1, we start off with this improvisation right off the bat. You're in late 60s Zappa kind of territory right here. You start off, you've got these kind of clattering drums and the very effective use of silence and kind of something very, again, influenced by the great Edgar Varese. You hear a lot of that kind of, how should I say it, 20th century classical composition. You hear bits of kind of Pierre Boulez or Elliott Carter kind of influenced stuff going on here. The improvisations, of course, lead into America Drinks and Goes Home, one of those fantastic tunes originally off of Absolutely Free, an incredible tune. Ray Collins just sings the hell out of this thing. Again, a lot of fantastic singers with Zappa over the years, but those early albums with Ray Collins, just, man, that guy really could sing and really brought something special to the thing. So it's great to hear more recordings of this kind of thing. Going into Help I'm a Rock and Transylvania Boogie, the arrangement that we heard, chronologically at least, a lot of us first heard off Ahead of Their Times, another recording from 1968. But here, oh man, I'm telling you, like I said, it's the kind of stumbling, bumbling groove that Jimmy Carl Black and Roy get together when they lock in, and then, Art Tripp doing the fills over the top. It really gives this, there's something to this sound of the late 60s Mothers that really just appeals to me. I mean, of course, I don't want to digress on this too much, but, I'm a musician myself. I do my own thing. And, I always found that late 60s Mothers of Invention sound was very inspiring to me, perhaps a little bit too on the nose at times in the past, but, it's just really a great, great sound. We go into kind of a medley of early 60s kind of R&B tunes, some of them covers, some of them originals. My Boyfriend's Back, right? Was that the Chiffons or one of those kind of, bands like that? Going into Bust His Head, which is an original from Zappa, but it sounds very much of the genre of that kind of thing. Tiny Sick Tears Jam, which basically is a improvisation over the groove from 96 Tears, the great question mark and the Mysterians tune. If you don't know that tune, you gotta check it out. One of the classics, etc. Moving into Memories of El Monte, fantastic tune that Zappa wrote for the Penguins, I believe it was early on, along with Ray Collins. Fantastic tune. Status Pack Baby, interpolating a little bit of Petrushka by the great Igor Stravinsky. You know what I mean? Valerie, like I said earlier, In the Sky, just really those R&B influence, just like, just really hitting it, rounding off the first disc. Wow. I mean, I was listening to the whole thing, my jaw was down to here, I'm talking about like the old cartoons, you know what I mean? It's like, holy cow, great stuff, fantastic. But there's 2 more CDs to go, 2 more. So put it on, and we start off with very long, extended take on King Kong. King Kong, again, one of these Zappa melodies that really just kind of was repurposed over the years again and again in many different contexts. Fantastic. Some of you out there, I'm going to go deep on this one. Some of you may recognize a little bit of the melody, may have been influenced by one of those early Conlon Nancarrow string quartets, if you know what I'm talking about. Da 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 ba da da da. You know what I mean? You can go a little bit deeper and try to search that one out. I'll tell you what. You know what I mean? It was like when I heard it, it was like, oh, maybe Zappa and Nancarrow. Of course, there's like a long kind of mutual appreciation society. Well, maybe not mutual. I don't know if Nancarrow ever heard of Zappa, but definitely Frank was a huge fan of Conlon Nancarrow's works. Okay, so we're going to continue moving on here. We got King Kong. Split into 2 parts. There's a little bit of vocal contribution from the GTOs at this point. GTOs, of course, one of the Zappa kind of protege bands featuring Pamela Des Barres. We'll talk about her again a little bit later in this review. It goes into an interpolation of the melody from the great Edgar Varèse, Octandre. Wonderful piece by him. If you don't know this piece, do check it out if you don't know Varèse's music, and you gotta know Varèse's music. If you got this far in this Zappa review, you know who Edgar Varèse is, right? I don't need to tell you so much, but please do check it out. Do check out these sources. And then we move on, more improvisations going into, at one point, there is the improvisation which is called Meow on here. We did hear that, a little excerpt of that same piece on You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 5, right? There was 2 discs on that. One was kind of focusing on the 60s Mothers. The other was the 1982 band. But we did hear that on there. And then that goes into God Bless America, which we heard excerpted again on Uncle Meat. Uncle Meat, let me just say this. Again, if you got this far in this Zappa thing, you probably know the Uncle Meat album. But just in case you don't, go listen to that thing. Absolutely essential. One of the best recordings he ever put out, and I'm telling you, and he's got plenty of fantastic recordings. Okay, moving on from there, Plastic People, the old tune that appeared in one form on Absolutely Free, but this is the more kind of Louie version of it. You know, I'm talking about the little Louie vamp with the lyrics that appeared on the Absolutely Free version. We get a couple takes of the Duke on there. Again, the Duke, this is a composition which has been pulled apart and reconfigured in various things. We also may know it as the Return of the Hunchback Duke, again on Can't Do That on Stage Volume 5, but most people are going to be more familiar with it from the version that appeared on Burt Weenie Sandwich as part of Little House That I Used to Live In. Wow, this is, again, this is one of these really great Zappa compositions. This is one that I just find, it's just, there's something about it. There's something about all the right elements are there, and they're balanced wonderfully. There's 2 takes of it. I prefer take 2, but, you know, tell me which one you like, you know what I mean? Leave a comment for us down here below. It's fantastic stuff. We ended off with Khaki Sack. Again, going back to, as we were talking about earlier, about Funky Nothingness, the studio version of Khaki Sack finally appeared on that album just a year or 2 ago, but this is the version that had been played for a couple years. Previous to that, you got the horn section tooting away on that. Like I said, it's the sound of those saxophones going through the guitar amps that just, I love that sound. There's something about it, you know, and especially it's just, you know, the way the soloists are going. And again, the interaction between Frank and the band. What I really love, not only, I talked a little bit earlier about Frank's comping and his vamping behind the soloist, but, you know, the band has these kind of, these backgrounds. The horn section kind of will fall into these backgrounds. Bop, 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 bop. You know what I'm talking about if you've heard any of these late 60s Zappa live recordings. The horn section had these kind of backgrounds that I don't know if they're being cued in or who's bringing them in, but they just sound really fantastic. Just very different kind of sound. Again, you know, it's like, you know, Zappa was famously, you know, not a jazz fan, or at least he would claim that, even though he worked with all of these jazz musicians over the years and so forth. But, you know, it's improvisation, very coming kind of from jazz, but it's more of a modal thing. You know, it's more of a kind of, you know, R&B influenced phrasing kind of thing. So it's just a really fantastic sound. And so I highly recommend it. So disc 1 and disc 2 we've covered so far. Incredible stuff. So let's go on to disc 3. And again, if you want improvisations by Zappa in the late 60s Mothers, you got it right here, especially on disc 3. We got some long jams. We got the whip, which is, let me just say there's some footage. There was some footage that was shot at this same performance, which went unviewed for 50-something years. You know, I mean, that has been synced up to the sound from this performance. You should go check this out. Just look, you know, go to YouTube, whatever, you know, check on Zappa Whisky 1968. There's 14 minutes of footage that has been synced up to this. So the whip is one of the GTOs. Again, you know, this is that Zappa protege girl band, quote unquote. One of the ladies liked to be beaten with a belt, and so this is kind of Zappa performance art thing going on, however you want to phrase it. You know, he's kind of hitting her with the belt. Okay, whatever, you know what I'm saying? I'll just drop that there, leave it without comment. You know, you can go check it out. He does make a comment at one point, reminds me of New York. I wonder if he's talking about, you know, I know the Mothers and the Velvet Underground did a couple performances together at some point, and maybe it's kind of referring to, you remember it, what is it, Venus and Furs? I guess there was Mary Woronov did some sort of whip performance live on stage. Mary Woronov, of course, you know, you ever see Eating Raoul? Okay, we're getting a little bit deep into the trivia here, but go check it out, you know, if you want to. There's all kinds of, you can go on a deep dive on all this stuff. Okay, so anyways, there's these long improvisations. There's the whip. There's Whiskey Soufflé, which is another long kind of jamming improvisation, that kind of rolling, you know what I'm saying, kind of thing. Zappa just soloing over the top, the horns doing these backgrounds, long tenor solo, etc. Just great stuff. Absolutely essential. Brown Shoes Don't Make It. A live performance of Brown Shoes Don't Make It. Brown Shoes Don't Make It, of course, again, off of Absolutely Free, one of these incredible compositions, multi-part, just kind of going through a lot of different musical areas, kind of hitting a lot of different kind of styles, almost like a mini musical, I think it had been described at the time. You want some more? You want some more trivia? You want some more trivia? Okay, let's go ahead. On the original studio recording of Brown Shoes Don't Make It, of course, Don Ellis plays trumpet. Don Ellis, the incredible Don Ellis, trumpet player, composer, Don Ellis Orchestra, working in very kind of similar areas to what Frank was doing at the time, and actually Don Ellis and Frank's band or Frank's pool of musicians sharing a couple of musicians, chief among them Ralph Humphrey and Dave Parlato. Dave Parlato, interestingly enough, the father of Gretchen Parlato. Okay, we're getting deep into the trivia here, but going back. Okay, so Brown Shoes Don't Make It, incredible composition, and they nail it. They play the hell out of it, and it goes into a kind of jam based on the vamp from Brown Shoes. Another long guitar solo, and then, oh my goodness, you got a couple like vintage period mixes of The Whip and a mono mix of Hungry Freaks Daddy done by Frank at the time. Let's take a look at the booklet right here. We got some liner notes from Joe Travers, vaultmeister Joe Travers, bringing us once again. I mean, thank you so much, Joe. You're bringing us the right stuff. You know what the Zappa fans out there want. And it's just like every time we get one of these, every 6 months or whatever it is that these kind of box sets or collections have been coming out, it's just been amazing stuff. So thank you very much for that. We've also got liner notes here from Pamela Des Barres. Pamela Des Barres, of course, was one of the GTOs. GTOs were, again, just very briefly, one of these kind of Frank protege bands, people kind of hanging around on the scene. Frank produced one album, which to me, I'll say it's just an acquired taste, but if you want to go down that rabbit hole, go check out this album. Really interesting stuff. And she kind of gives us a little bit of the cultural context, the milieu of what was going on right here in the late 1960s and what it was like to actually be at this performance. She was on stage, kind of contributing to the madness of it all. We'll also get back here, we've got an interview here between Ahmet Zappa and Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper, from the Alice Cooper Band, of course. The Alice Cooper Band was one of the kind of, in-between acts that was going on at this same performance. In addition to Wildman Fisher and the Alice Cooper Band, there was a Elvis impersonator, and I'm sorry I'm blanking on the gentleman's name right now. But just fantastic stuff. None of those recordings are actually present in this box set, but if you can probably go out there in the depths of the internet and track down some of that stuff, should you be so inspired to do so. Okay, take a look at some of the artwork here. I mean, fantastic picture, period picture of the Mothers. We got some more photos inside here. Take a look over here. Oh yeah, some crazy stuff going on that night, right? You know what I'm talking about? But what do you expect? You know what I mean? This is Frank Zappa. You know what I'm talking about? It's Frank Zappa. It's gonna be nuts. It's gonna be nuts, I'm telling you. All right? So, wrapping it up, what's my opinion of this thing? Give me a break. You know what my opinion is. This is amazing stuff. This is absolutely essential stuff. This, again, it's that one of those eras of Frank's music which for me is endlessly entertaining. You don't get hung up. For me, personally, just speaking personally, some of the later 1970s stuff going into the 1980s, that's really not my favorite Zappa kind of era. I like it when it was more kind of, I love the humor stuff at times, but it's like I like it when it's more musically oriented and it's more about, the compositions rather than the kind of buffoonery and joking and doo-doo and this and that or whatever. You know what I mean? But this is great stuff. This is absolutely essential. I highly recommend this. If you're into that late 1960s Zappa, you got to check this out. One way or another, you're going to find your way to this box set, and you are not going to be disappointed. So please do check it out.
To find out more about Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Whisky A Go-Go 1968, please visit the official website and check out the description below this video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to CatSynth TV.
Hey, you're watching CatSynth TV!